Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the FIDE Grand Prix. First leg out of 3. That rhymed. I'm not a rapper, though. That was not a planned introduction. I just hit record, and that's what we got. Today, I'm going to take you through the games of the third round of 6 in the initial group stage. And this was a very decisive round. Half of the games had a winner, which means that half of them had a loser. How good is your math? I hope you're all having a wonderful Sunday, unless you're watching this on Monday. Yeah, let's jump into the game. So, first game for you. Why is Grishuk, aka Thug Life, on the thumbnail? Well, Hikaru himself said that Grishuk is a very dangerous grandmaster, hence why he is named as such. And that is Hikaru's opponent for this round. Grishuk also is very known for hilarious interview responses. Go watch, after this video, the compilation of his responses to interview questions at the Candidates Tournament Moscow 2016, I think. This game was a Queen's Gambit by White. I would imagine that if Hikaru had played Queen's Gambit Declined, Grishuk might have gone for a Catalan. He might have also gone for a traditional setup. And I would be willing to bet Hikaru would have gone for Bishop e7, but we don't even have to know about that because Hikaru takes on c4. This is a very forcing line to play the Queen's Gambit accepted. And I really wonder if Hikaru was gonna play that if this happened. And I'm wondering that because White doesn't have to play knight f3, e3. White can play e4, which is the most greedy setup. You take the entire center and you try to win the pawn back. I don't know. We're gonna, we have yet to find out. But Grishuk played knight f3 on the second move, and Hikaru took. So it's kind of interesting. Like it's sort of like why didn't Grishuk just play c4 on the second move, right? Like we could have had something totally right? I mean, it's the same thing, but now you don't have the added advantage of playing against the Queen's Gambit accepted. So we now are forced into the classical main line of the QGA, and it's a very forcing line because, well, Black is going to get this position guaranteed. This is the best thing that White can do. It's the main line. White here has so many moves. The reason that I haven't started studying this with the Black side ever, and against knight f3, I've always generally played complete crap, and I haven't played into this main line. It's just so hard to learn. I mean, White can play b3 setups, a4 setups, knight c3 setups, queen e2, rook d1 setups, rook e1 setups, period, bishop back to d3, b3, or e2, knight d2. I mean, it's just, it's endless. And Grishuk plays rook e1 and knight c3. These two relatively normal looking moves take us from like 20,000 games played to like 40. Rook e1 and knight c3 are not a popular combination. It's much more common for White to do other stuff. Like not put the rook here, because it's not really clear what the rook is even doing, right? Because the rook is gonna not really have an open file ever, because there's no reason for Black to do this. So rook e1 is just like a random move, and so but the onus is really on Black to equalize. So Grishuk takes on c5, Hikaru trades queens and takes back, and right in this position, Hikaru spent 30 minutes because it's very clear that Grishuk wants to trade a knight on e4. Like, let's just say you play h6, right? You ask this knight what it's doing. Grishuk wants to put this knight back here, trade, and activate his bishop on one of these squares, probably c3. Then his rooks will laser beam, his knight can jump into d6 or c5, and this bishop on e2 will go to f3 and pressure the queen side as well. So Grishuk is on the verge of getting a very pleasant position. So Hikaru spends 30 minutes. He has to find a way to equalize. He does. Knight to e7, absolutely the correct approach, so that you can get your bishop to the c6 square, which then shuts down this rook, and it hits the knight. Knight probably has to go back, because if it goes forward, it just becomes a target, right? It's just going to become a target for the other side. Now rook there, knight f5 or knight c8 to trade in the future. Bishop can always come back to the b8 square and kick this knight out. And Grishuk here gets very forceful with Hikaru, not physically. He doesn't like try to like shove him. Knight takes b7. Knight takes b7 looks like a pure blunder, because even though you get the fork, that's the idea, even though you get the fork, your rook is stuck. But Grishuk does it on purpose. I mean, I don't believe that Grishuk overlooked the idea to trap his bishop. Grishuk just went for an endgame where, I mean, I don't know, maybe he missed this. I highly doubt it, but I didn't ask the players. Yeah, I mean, Grishuk, gets a situation on the board here where for the cost of the rook, he gets a bishop and he has a pawn. He has a 2-on-1. And you can argue that Black can play this for a win. I don't think so, because the pawn structure is so symmetrical and white just has absolutely no weaknesses. Like, there's no way for black to get through. So what does Hikaru do? He sacks the rook right back, and the players agree to a draw. A pawn each, opposite colored bishops. The other thing is that Hikaru has absolutely no risk to take because he already won a game. He's the leader of the section, and there's no reason to kind of get crazy. So, I mean, a relatively peaceful draw. Another game I'd like to show you is this game between Lenier Dominguez Perez. You guys have been correcting me in the comments. I do read it. Not Perez, but Perez. Also just Dominguez. Ledope versus Pintala Harikrishna. Now, this one excited me because it was advanced Caro-Kann. Now, Lenier is a more positional genius, so we're not going to get any crazy Tal variations or anything like this, but we have a squeeze variation. Knight d2, knight b3, preventing the move c5. White plays knight f3, bishop e2. Harikrishna here does not play the main line, which is knight e7, h6, g5, bishop g7. Thousands and thousands of games he plays for the immediate c5. So he plays queen c7, knight d7, and c5. Very few games, like maybe 40, 50 games in the database out of thousands. So I was very interested in this game. And the point is that black doesn't take with the knight. Black actually volunteers the bishop to the opponent. Black's like, go ahead, take my bishop. I don't care, stupid. Who even likes the bishop pair? And Lenier's like, all right, I mean, if you're giving me the bishop pair, obviously check, the knight will just go back here. And by the way, it's not even that bad if you move your king. You're not gonna, but it's not even that bad. So bishop e3, knight d4, and a6. And black actually does not have any problems here. I was actually very pleasantly surprised. You just have to prevent the knight from getting into d6. And even in a position of like move 15, I mean, this bishop is extremely solidly positioned here. I'm gonna do some investigating on this variation because Harikrishna got absolutely a completely normal position. I mean, he just put his knight back on e6, and white has no way through. White has no pawn breaks, which means if white has no pawn breaks, black also has no pawn breaks. What's gonna happen, folks? Game's gonna end in a draw. I mean, both sides play very solidly. Actually, Harikrishna offers a trade of pawns and almost seems to be taking over the game a little bit because his knight has better long-term prospects than his bishop, but the players very quickly repeat moves. Yeah, I mean, if Hari wanted to keep the game going, I don't know, maybe here he can play like rook d8, but it's just a draw. So this game gets a relatively brief recap. Harikrishna plays a very nice idea in an annoying line of the Caro-Kann and gets a totally normal draw. Fereseya versus Wojtaszek, this was anything but a normal draw. By the way, I didn't spoil anything. If you were paying attention in the introduction, I said there were half of the games were decisive, right? So you know I'm obviously going to, right? I mean, it doesn't take rocket science. But the game itself was anything but peaceful. So it was this anti-Sicilian. Where did we see this? Were you paying attention in yesterday's recap? Did you click on the video? Of course you did. It was the Shirov game versus Lenier Dominguez Perez. Almost got me again. Now, the difference in the two games. This move, F5, is a new innovation. Anytime you have a new trendy variation that all the top grandmasters are going to be playing in their online and over-the-board games, we're going to get developments. Perez played knight f6, but here f5 by Wojtaszek. This is a newer idea, and it scores really well for black. And this position has been reached like maybe 60 times. 5 of those games, only 5 have gone rook f8. Now, fe4 is considered the best move, maybe according to Stockfish, but rook f8 is extremely challenging. Rook f8 looks like the king got drunk, fell asleep, and didn't castle, right? Looks like short castle is the way to go. But actually, there might be some merit to this. It might be better to keep the king in the middle, and the king is actually safer. So, rook f8. Now, this is an extremely highly scoring variation, and as early as move like 10, 11, we have a game that's just never, ever occurred. Now, we have a queen trade, so that's how you know we're going to have a little bit of a more peaceful debate of position. Wojtaszek plays knight g4. The threat is very obvious. Knight f2 to trap the rooks, but also there is knight to e3 if you want it, but he prefers to play bishop f5 first. Rook d2. Now, knight e3 is no longer a tempo-winning move. Knight e2, knight e3, and Wojtaszek takes over the initiative with the move d5. Now, Wojtaszek here had an incredible move. He also could have gone knight e5. That looks like it hangs the knight, just a one mover. But then you have bishop e4, knight f1. supported by the rook, and the bishop hits the rook and the king, which is why that bishop is so powerful in this variation. So Wojtaszek has a way here for a nasty tactical shot. He opts instead to march down the middle of the board with his d-pawn, all right? In this case, whipping the d out is actually acceptable behavior. Knight d1, takes, e5. I mean, Wojtaszek is marching down the middle of the board here. There's nothing you can do. And Fedoseev in this position plays h3, and Wojtaszek can go e4. And God help me, I have no idea why he didn't. I really don't. I mean, look at this position. If bishop g4 is played, you can take and play bishop g7, but you can also just do this. And if bishop f5, rook f5, this is untouchable. Whatever you touch it with, at some point I can go e3. So for example, knight takes d4, e3. And if rook d3, I have takes, e2, and the rook can't stay guarding the rook. Black wins. Wojtaszek for a third game in a row is completely winning, but he plays pawn takes f4. And now this allows Fedoseev to just find very creative ways of dealing with the pressure. Wojtaszek continues to apply pressure, I must say. Rook takes f4, incredible move, giving up a rook, right, but for winning it back. Still, the pressure of this bishop on h6 is extremely strong. For a third game in a row, Wojtaszek is creating winning chances for himself, but he doesn't have a lot of time, and even though he's still able to win a pawn, this is not a very winnable endgame. And it's not very winnable because black just... Rook and knight versus rook is a draw. So even if the knight sacrifices itself for the remaining pawn, it's just a draw. So close by Wojtaszek. This dude could technically have 3 out of 3. This is nuts. This is absolutely insane. And next game is by another creative genius, Richard Rapport. Now, he's playing Apaydin. This is Apaydin's first game with the white pieces, not in his life, but in this tournament. And we have a variation known as the Richter-Rauser Sicilian. One of the spiciest, sexiest openings. Not a really sexy name. You know, it's Richter, like you kind of sound like you're throwing up a little bit of phlegm, but sexy variation leads to some extremely imbalanced games. You only play this with black if you're okay with losing. I mean, you're never okay with losing, but you know that in order to try to win, you have to take some risk. Unlike, you know, if you're playing the Queen's Gambit accepted with black, you also have to understand, like in the first game, you might make a draw, right? In this game, anything but. So Queen d2, and now in a position that's been reached about 35,000 times, Rapport plays a move that's been played maybe 900 times. Queen b6. Why? Because the entire point of this variation is to play like this. Is to play the move b5. Like, black tries to attack behind the pawns. So the way Rapport plays this, Queen b6, hits the knight, gets it to move, and then plays like normal, and then dips back. And the difference with this setup is that you force white to play g4, not f4, which is normally what white goes for, although that move might come in the future. You also force the knight out of the middle. So it's a slightly different position, and bishop f6 normally is met with gf, but in this case will be met with bishop takes f6 probably. But there are also variations where the d6 pawn has to be protected. So a3, rook b8, and obviously it's just a very spicy position, right? We have ab, rook b4, the rook has arrived, bishop takes g5. I mean, insane position. And in this position, there's this incredible move, bishop c3. Now, if queen c3, there's rook e4. If b c3, there is knight a5. If you take knight b3, you lose the queen. And if you take the knight and then take the rook, it's mate. I mean, obviously, that's not going to happen. But knight a5 is an exceptional tactic, which leads to God knows what. I don't think Rapport missed it. I think he just liked this instead. He played bishop d4. It can't be taken. If you take on d4, you just help me. My attack is stronger than yours now. Bishop d7, rook b8, you resign. You're just going to resign on the next move. Queen b6, rook b2, you're going to resign. So you can't do that. Apaydin here plays a cold-blooded move. My man moves the king over. Like, doesn't touch the bishop, the rooks. It's now Rapport's game to take over. He plays queen b6, bishop e3. I mean, he is a menace in the position, but he gives up d6. Now, he gets e4 back, but it's a step slightly in the wrong direction because he has to start respecting the white position as well, as the pieces have begun to consolidate. Rook e3. Obviously, he saw rook a4, he just didn't like it. Rook e3, queen c4, and Rapport takes on f3 and takes on g5. Now, he is up 2 pawns, and he has the laser beam bishops. right? So he has 2 extra pawns and he has a piece for the exchange. Completely crazy game, and the players decide, let's go to an endgame. We don't need the queens anymore. Reports like, bro, do you not see this? It's a 4-on-1. That's like showing up to the park trying to pick a fight with 4 dudes. What are you, nuts? I'm gonna beat the brakes off of you. And Reports also hasn't moved the bishop, like just as an additional flex. Let's count the amount of turns it takes for him to move his bishop. It's been 35 moves, and he's spotting the mana bishop. He just hasn't moved the bishop. He has absolutely no need to move it. And by the way, instant replay, if you are confused about the game plan of black is to push the pawns. The game plan of white, I mean, this is, the fact that you can survive this with white is unbelievable. Like, really? Nobody has to move. It's incredibly difficult to calculate everything here. But Aparin finds a way. He finds a way here to push his b-pawn to an exceptional distance. It took 37 moves, and the bishop dies on the spot. But the problem is that the bishop got locked away, which means I'm going to sack the rook, and now your position is also stopped. This is not what you wanted. You didn't want these bozos to, I mean, right? That's not how fights work. If it's a 2-on-1 fight, they're not going to fight each other standing right behind one another. What kind of idiots fighting in the park are we talking about? All right? So knight g3, rook h2, and when the dust ends up settling, that rook is going to have to sacrifice itself, and it does. But 2 knights and a pawn, and yeah, knights that tie together like this are unbreakable. There's nothing you can do. The pawns also can't get through. Rook versus knight at the end of the day is also a draw. And it was a little exciting even at the end as both players made queens, but draw offered and draw accepted. A crazy game. All right, we had definitely some crazy games, but we are about to have some even more fun, okay? 4 decisive games. Here you go. Are you ready? I hope you're ready. We have a Caro-Kann in the game between Levon Ranyan and Vincent Keimer. Keimer loves the Caro-Kann, which means that I love Vincent Keimer, because the more games on the Caro-Kann he plays, the more I learn. Exchange Caro, h3 to prevent bishop g4, and bishop f5 is already prevented. I like to play g6 in this position. But we get a game that's very interesting. Keimer negates development and instead is like, Levon, I would like your bishop. Levon is like, sure, take it. Knight c3 has almost never happened. Knight c3 is unheard of. Normally c3 gets played. Levon steers the game into territory that's just never happened ever, which just goes to show you we're playing not in a Caro-Kann, we're playing in a structural fight. Like the pawn structure has been determined. And on move 11, we have one of the most egregious things I've ever seen. Knight takes bishop, and in this position, Levon doesn't take with queen, he doesn't take with knight. This absolute psychopath takes with the pawn, doubling his own pawns, and that's the best move. That's the best move, because you protect e4 from the center of the other the other knight and the other bishop, right? You can always kick out them, the 2 pieces. The c file is now open, and the diagonal for the queen is open. C takes d3 is a potential visual travesty, and yet is highly effective and very talented. Kind of like myself. So, queen b6, knight back to f3, and now e6. This bishop is gonna solve deja vu with the bishops, right? Queen d2. Now we're trying to fight on these dark squares and these dark squares. So a5, rook ac1. Levon's moves play themselves. Knight to c5. Bishop f4 hits the queen, and he takes the bishop. But why would you take that bishop? Well, because now the progress of the position continues. Even though you're taking the bad bishop, time is everything. You don't have time to back up, right? So he plays rook c1, queen d8, queen c2. The battle must be won on the c file. It has to be won. He has to be there first and then beat up the weaknesses of black. So queen c7, rook c7, rook b7. The rook can't move, the knight can barely move, the b-pawn can't move, king f8, bishop d6, knight e5. The position for Levon is playing itself. Bishop e5. Of course, don't trade bishop for knight. Leave black with this depressing piece. Rook c8, d4. Why would he go d4? So the knight can't move. He doesn't care about any of this stuff over here. Keimer plays king d8. Why does Keimer do that? Because if he plays rook c4, it's mate. You can't escape. King d8, b3. Go ahead and take my d4 pawn. What are you going to do? You're going to take this and get mated? Good luck. Well, you don't get mated. You got to lose your knight. And now Levon just has to create a second front of attack. If g5, you will crack the pawns open. And watch as that happens, right? At some point, you're gonna crack the pawns open. You're gonna crack the pawns open. It doesn't matter which one takes. You're gonna make a queen. And Chimera resigns when f5 is on the board. Gorgeous game. What more can I say? I mean, what? It only took me about 3.5 minutes to get through it. What more can you say? That was unbelievable. I mean, he played an exchange caro. He didn't allow his opponent to develop naturally. Chimera played this sideline knight b4. He didn't play like g6 and the more traditional setup with bishop f5 to trade off. He played a little bit strange setup, and Levon just compromises pawn structure temporarily to open up the c-file for attack. And oh my god, did the man ever make the c-file count? Look at this! Mwah! Amazing. I don't even want to keep this on the screen anymore. It's just going to lower the value of the game, like a museum limiting its capacity or something. Next game I would like to show you. By the way, Levon's 2.5 out of 3. He's won 2 games out of his first 3. Put some respect on his damn name, will you? I mean, the man's been to like 4 candidates tournaments. He had fourth highest rating of all time. I'm just saying. All right, e4, e6. What more fitting in Group A than Andrei Yesipenko going up against the Frenchman who is playing the French? I'm the first one who made that joke, by the way, in history. No one ever has said a Frenchman is playing the French, just me. So we have the classical French. We have Steinitz variation and bishop e3. And in this position, it's generally considered for white to play queen d2 and long castle. Andrei plays, again, remember Report in a position that was reached 40,000 times, played something that was only played 1,000 times. A3 is not very common. A3 is also a bit of a strange move, right? Because if you're then going to play all the normal moves like queen d2 and long castle, why'd you play a3? You gotta find out. Be patient. You gotta find out. So the game plan generally in the classical French, there are multiple game plans. White plays h4, h5, g4, g5, h6, blah, 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 blah. Queen h2 delivers mate. Black plays b5, queen, like in some capacity, b4, blah, 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 delivers mate. However, at the end of the day, there is the fundamental imbalance of the light squared bishop being trash, the French bishop, which is struggling to get out, and the dominant knight in the center on d4. If the knight survives versus the bishop and black does not create a successful attack, white will win by virtue of positional destruction. All right? Like the likes that you pay someone to tie you up and beat you with. Kids, you have to ask your parents about that. Rook b8, h4. So now we have the early makings of those two game plans, h4, b5 in the classical, right? In this position, Yesipenko plays rook h3, right? So rook h3 has 2 ideas. This, well, you about to find out. Queen c7, and now he plays the move which shows you why a3 is even possible. Now, could Bacrot have played b4 right away? Yes. I think actually this is a bit more in the style of the position, but maybe he didn't because this attack he thought was faster. Maybe he thought that the rook could rotate over. But now Yesipenko plays b4 himself. Now, this is an enormous risk because if it doesn't work, you're going to look like a fool, right? b4 is saying black can't attack me anymore. That's very unorthodox. That's very unorthodox. I just told you what the game plans were. White is not supposed to be fighting on that side of the board. And now we have f6 cracking at the center. ef6, he jumps in to take on d4. Rook f6. So now white is not going to attack here because black has plenty of defenses. Knight, rook, queen, everybody. But at the end of the day, folks, I've been telling you about this imbalance. And if we get to an endgame, it's going to be bad news for black. Knight e2, and now we see the point. The rook jumps to c3. Black plots the knight in c4. White stabilizes this side of the board. Now, Bacrot actually has a good position here. I told you, white is not supposed to be doing this. If Bacrot finds the right way forward, bishop d7 and a5 maybe, he's going to be in good shape. Knight g1, very nice idea. The point of this is that we want to create that knight versus bishop situation and put this knight on e5, where it will live permanently, right? Black goes bishop e8. I think here Bacrot had to play faster. He had to play for a5 because now bishop e8 and now a5, white plays knight f3, ab, ab, and the bishop, it's like, is the bishop coming this way? Or is the bishop going to serve more of a purpose on this diagonal, right? e6 is a bit of a weakness. Queen e7, we're moving the wrong way. Probably queen b7, rook a8 is the right way to go. Back row opts instead to go this way to try to put some pressure on the pawn, but we have rook b3 first. Now he does this. Queen c5 looking to trade the queens, and Yesipenko decides to get rid of the knight. Now, rook like this. In this position, there was also dc4, so opening up the queen like this. Rook e3, and chess has to be played from this point forward. Maybe a rook f5 to hit the queen. Black is still in good shape, right? Still attacking on this side of the board. But one pawn capture and putting the bishop on this diagonal allows Yesipenko to now very, very quickly consolidate. b5 and knight d4. And I told you a long time ago, if we end up in a knight versus bishop situation, right? Again, taking his foot off the gas, maybe coming to a2 would have been a bit better. Knight c6, rook a1. The tide is very quickly turning. White is not supposed to be winning the battle on the queen side in the classical French, and white absolutely is. And back row doesn't have to sack his queen here, but he's low on time, so he decides to sack the queen and try to win the a-pawn, but he's just unable to. There's just nothing he can do. And the game ends here after black moves. Either he lost on time or he just decided to resign with queen e6 coming. So a very topsy-turvy game, but we got there in the end. Yesipenko defeats the Frenchman playing the French, but I mean, my God, that was a complex French. And ultimately, it just seemed like back row was just not, he wasn't pulling the trigger. I mean, he didn't have a gun, but, you know, metaphorically speaking, chess gun, water gun. On the queen side, and chess is so brutal, it's this capture that's apparently better. You know, because if you look in the game, right, we had bc3 and we had rook back to b1 to protect the king. If rook e3, it's also not so clear, but if the rook has to stay guarding the knight, and black can continue to attack the king. I think what happened in the game is white just got too much of a nice consolidation. And I think back row misevaluated, perhaps something occurred. I don't know. Again, I haven't spoken to the players, but very complex game that ultimately totally shifts in the later stages, and Yesipenko wins. Yesipenko wins a nice game. Next game I'd like to show you is the game between Wesley So and Alexei Shirov from Group D. We have an English Slav, but this is a mainline Slav position, slow Slav. Yesterday, we saw Dubov play bishop G... No, 2 days ago, we saw Dubov play bishop G6 against Keimer. But today, we have bishop E4, inducing F3 main line. Now, white normally plays queen B3 here. That's the main line. And then bishop D2 in long castle. Bishop D2 is about 70 games out of, again, hundreds, almost hundreds of thousands. Queen B3 is more popular, whatever. But bishop D2 is so unpopular. And the craziest thing is by move 9, we have a position that's never happened. So the game plan is completely different. Queen B3 is not going to be a thing anymore. And Shirov here is like, yo, you wasted mad time. I'm not going to let you take my bishop anymore. We have bishop C1 undeveloping, hitting the bishop. And Shirov is like, I'm going to get rid of my bishop for your bishop, stupid. So now you can't, your knight can't take me. So why is your knight even over here? Now, if white wants to play queen E2 and win this pawn, this knight gets trapped. So if you blunder a knight like that in this tournament, you should be slapped a couple of times. Like a quota of maybe 5 to 7 slaps, and then you should just be sent home. They should cancel the visa. Like, what are you doing? Could have given the spot to someone who won't do that. So Wesley plays G3. Right, so Wesley plays G3 to get rid of the knight threats. C5, check, and Shirov sacrifices a pawn. It would not be a game of Alexei Shirov if he didn't sacrifice something to make it interesting. Why is black able to sacrifice this? Because of all the open lines, right? So bishop c5, his pieces are a little bit more active. He has something we like to call the initiative. He is creating a lot of useful moves that create threats and improve his position. Knight e5. Knight e5 maybe is okay. He has a lot of other options. He can go out with the queen and attack the knight, castles. But now what? It's a bit of a vague position. Like, he can't really create that many threats. I mean, he can castle, which is always a good move, but that's not a move that creates a threat. Now white is going to consolidate, and at the end of the day, you count the pawns. White has 6, black has 5. White is winning, right? So stuff to figure out. So he plays queen d3, which is a very reasonable move to trade the queens and try to continue to apply some pressure. Maybe taking the bishop, maybe targeting the pawn. King e7, rook d1, rook d8. Seems like Shirov has done everything correct. Everything. But now what? He's still down a pawn. Not so easy. Bishop b4 targets the knight. Good move. Knight goes back to e2. All right. Now we have knight back to e5. And as we saw in the game between Bakro and Yesipenko, at some point there was a step in the wrong direction. Apparently, Shirov should have continued to come forward. g5 is a menace because you stop any knight from going to f4. If white tries to play h4 and get rid of it, now the knight will come in, and now white is going to lose the game because not only does white have no development, there are legitimate threats being created. Like, at some point, you're going to win these pawns. There's just too many threats in the position. Knight f2. So, knight e5 allows Wesley to begin the consolidation process. And the more pieces he trades, the happier he's going to be. He trades a pair of rooks, and he has his king on e2. And Shirov plays knight d5 and tries to come forward with the knights, right? But Wesley is just, I mean, he's getting there. He's getting to that stage of consolidation. Knight is in on d3. Wesley consolidates, plays knight e1. Knight goes back to e5. So again, Shirov sacrificed the pawn to create some compensation, and he had it. But too long was spent not doing enough. And now Wesley begins the counterattack. And the side that was oppressed for a very long time is going to be pissed off and is going to move forward and is going to do it very swiftly. And oftentimes one mistake and the downtrend of the position follows the other. And now he's going to lose another pawn. And Wesley just has to win this game. It's still a little bit tricky. Trust me, you would lose this with white because, you know, you might blunder a fork somewhere. Hey, you know, on a serious note, I know I make comments like that. That's for humor. I'm just making a joke. I'm not trying to insult you. I've seen some comments that are like very upset by that. Like, you don't like when I insult the audience. Chill out. You're really going to spend that much time of your life being that upset about a random sentence in a YouTube video? Come on. I'm obviously joking. It's just, chess is a hard game. Shame on you for feeling that way. King c6, knight f4, takes, and, well, Wesley, it's just a matter of technique now, right? And Shirov resigns because you either play bishop c5 and lose via fork, or you play king e6 and you lose via mate. You know, having a mate is good. In chess, in the Grand Prix, not so much. So Wesley wins. Shirov 2 straight losses, but hopefully he bounces back. And the final game of today's video is a game between Vidit Gujarati and Danil Dubov. This was a wild game. You wouldn't think of it in the first 5 moves. It looks like the players are just trolling one another with symmetrical position. But a5 played to counteract white's queen. And we have a4, queen to1. Now, what the heck is this position? It's complete symmetry. Why did white waste time moving the queen back and forth to induce a4? Black is trying to create imbalance in the position because the truth is, in a totally symmetrical structure, black's position is worse than white because white goes first. So white always creates the first attack, right? So black has this pawn on a4. It's taking space, but it could potentially be a liability, which is why he has to play queen a5. In this position, we have bishop d2 targeting the queen. We have knight c6, basically saying, I don't care about you targeting my queen. You have no useful discoveries. And we have a brand new position on move 13. Somewhere around here, we had a couple of games in the database, Nakamura Dingli Ren from the Speed Chess Championship, like this, a3. But we have a new position on move 13. Dubov plays knight a5. The queen comes up, asking the knight to come back, and now the queen drops all the way back, so that it cannot be a target anymore. Bishop f5, rook c1, rook c8. The rooks are coming over here because that's clearly where the game is going to be played, so the rooks don't need to stand on the f-file, and white can do this, which is always nice. It's always nice to do that. The bishop is not going to get activated anyway. So, knight to e5. I told you in a symmetrical structure, the player that goes first always has the advantage. Dubov decides here that he doesn't want queens on the board anymore. Vidit plays an interesting idea here. He plays the move g4. That is a winning trade for black, but the knight is stuck defending the middle. So, for example, if Vidit played slowly, like h3, and then just played, like, I don't know, a random move, black plays rook a8, black plays e6, and black has the pressure, right? So Vidit strikes before black is able to consolidate. He trades and he wins the pawn on d5. So very complex game. Rook a8 is definitely a consistent idea to try to pressure the a2 weakness. And Dubov trades, offers an exchange of knights. Now, this position is very annoying for black. Very annoying. Because if you take on b4, I take, you can take on a2, I take, you take, I take. So now I have a target and a passed pawn. which just sucks. Like, that is so annoying to deal with. I have a red carpet to the finish line. I mean, I just have to not lose the pawn, but this is a terrible position for black to defend. But how do you defend this? Stockfish gives some moves here. Stockfish gives this idea bishop f6, which just looks like the dumbest move in the world. Looks like that move does nothing. It has an idea, though. The point is that this is protected. So the point is that that's protected, and the king can always get off the back rank. So that's the point of bishop f6. There's also more forcing measures, which are e5, just giving this up, and you have to calculate all that. Dubov plays knight a5. The problem with the move knight a5 is that it gives white a little bit of time. It allows white to play rook b1 and rook c7. And the rooks of black are now disconnected. So black still has to be ultra precise. And in this position, he plays bishop back to e6. Now, e6 was the way to go. Obviously, he didn't like something about his rook being stuck here. He didn't, I don't know. Again, I don't talk to the players. He decides to go back to e6 with his bishop. Visually, it looks like d5 is just begging to be played, right? So obviously, when Dubov played bishop e6, he knew d5 was going to happen. He must have thought he had something. He must have thought there was something there. d5, bishop into g4. Now, f3 looks really good here. The bishop will go here, and white will build up a center, but he can't do that. Uh-oh. So then how the heck is white going to operate here if he can't do that? That must have been Dubov's idea. What he must have missed was that there's h3 and then e4. And this, even though it can be taken, the rook is hit. Uh-oh. And the craziest thing is the rook has nowhere to go. The rook cannot cover the bishop. So the bishop has to sacrifice itself. The rook has to sacrifice itself, and the bishop gets out with an extra pawn. But now there's rook e1, the bishop's only move, and in this position there is one and only one move that guarantees white an advantage. And Vidit finds it, and I think Vidit found it all the way from bishop e6. A multiple move combination by force, bishop c1, bishop there, rook e1, and now knight c2 back. Backwards knight moves are some of the hardest to find in chess, because now you attack this, this is protected, and the knight is traveling back toward the middle to get that bishop. White is winning. White is winning. It's even by material, but white is winning because the black pieces are a little bit discoordinated, uncoordinated, and these are weaknesses. And Vidit converts this in beautiful fashion. Look at that move. Why can this not be taken? Well, rook e8. And I'm threatening rook c8, and even if you get out, your bishop dies. Your bishop is stuck. That's so tragic. And that's what, I mean, something along those lines happens. He ends up just having to sacrifice. And again, this is a position you might lose because 5 pawns versus 1, a little bit scary. Even though there's 2 rooks on the board, not at this level. Not at this level. At this level, f4, and Dubov just decides not even to play on. Because you take on b7 and you walk the king up and you get to f7. I mean, it's just, you can't, there's nothing to be done here. There's a million ways to win, but they all involve bringing your king, and you obviously have to bring it around this way. Because if you try to win by going this way, you're not making it through. So you have to go around the other way. Your king has to, right, walk up and win the game. So huge win for Vidit. Big bounce back win. Dubov suffers his first loss. Standings are all on the website. The link is in the description. But in Group A, it's Hikaru up top. Group B, we have Wojtaszek still in first place. And we have Group C is Levon just crushing, and Group D is a tie between Wesley So and Linier, Dominguez Perez. I will see you all for round number 4. Have a good rest of your Sunday, or a good week if it's Monday. Get out of here.